So I'm from philanthropy, and I'm here speaking to a group representing regional councils. And the question is, why is that? And I suppose the reason I got the invitation is that I understand the theme of this conference is building community. And just to jump to the punchline, I guess main point of my remark is that so many of our communities, especially here in Northeast Ohio, are undergoing massive transformations for which we are not presently wired to make the journey. And so we're in this process of rewiring. And I'm going to assert as well that regional councils and metropolitan planning organizations sit at exactly the center of a lot of the rewiring that has to occur. But it's going to require some rather dramatic changes in how we conceive of organizations such as yours. And it may be a journey that you don't want to make, but I hope that as you're here for the next couple of days and thinking about what building community might mean, that if you take away nothing else, you'll take away a thought or two from this presentation, that it may be time to be reconceiving of new roles and new ways of working. And I suppose I am Exhibit A, or my colleagues at the fund are Exhibit A, because as Howard mentioned, I'm with philanthropy, and over the last several years, we have basically turned our world upside down to try to place some new roles here in Northeast Ohio, and have dived headfirst into the world of economic development and economic competitiveness. And so my goal is to share some of our experiences in engaging in these somewhat unnatural acts, and to see if any of those lessons might be useful for you in your work. And as Howard mentioned, I'm with the Fund for Our Economic Future, and what the fund is, it's a coming together of the philanthropic community in Northeast Ohio. We originally were formed in 2004, when really a handful of foundations from across Northeast Ohio came together, but is now more than 100 different philanthropic entities. And believe me, we're not a group that's used to working with each other, but we came together to work on issues of long-term economic competitiveness. And I'm pretty proud, and I think my colleagues are pretty proud of the progress that we've made. And I think we would assert that it's only when a region unites and only when a region works across boundaries that we are likely to rise to the distinct challenges in front of us. So I'm a recovering consultant, and so every instinct in my body is now to move into the part of the presentation where I layer on a whole set of economic and perhaps even econometric analysis. But Ricky, there's actually one time slot that's worse than before lunch, which is 20 minutes after lunch, which is when all the blood is, in the stomach and so forth. So I will refrain myself and just say, look, there's one really, I think, piece of analysis that exhibits the plight of what we faced in Northeast Ohio. And it's around jobs. If you go back and look over the last many years, you would see that while the rest of the U.S. was in the business of creating all kinds of jobs, we in Northeast Ohio had a few good years, but we weren't having nearly as good of years as the rest of the country. And so we were literally shedding a lot of jobs. And so while there's been a great deal of hullabaloo in recent times about the Great Recession, this really has been something that we've been struggling with in our part of the world for a very long time. And in fact, if you look at what we face, you'd see that the high watermark for productivity in Northeast Ohio was sometime in the early 1950s. And so this is kind of the bummer part of the presentation, but it's to suggest that what we are facing or have been facing in Northeast Ohio is nothing short of an economic transformation. This isn't just sort of getting through a period, but instead we have something fundamental at work. Now, if you're sitting out there feeling smug, lest you think we're a bunch of losers in Northeast Ohio, we're not alone. In fact, I actually have the data, and if anybody smirks, I can call out some of the other cities and who's worse than us. But if you look, the issues that we're facing are quite similar across much of the northern United States. It reflects all these economic trends and such that you know, but suffice it to say that this is really a phenomena of this structural change that has really been emblematic of much of the country. And sort of breaking the cycle of job loss is really at the core of what we're doing. And in fact, it's common in much of the industrial Midwest to talk about what we face as our own version of an economic Katrina, except that the Katrina, the hurricane that we faced, is something that really has unfolded over decades, as opposed to something that unfolded over a horrifying week. And I don't mean to say that in disrespect to any of our friends and colleagues in Louisiana and Mississippi, but rather to illustrate the magnitude of change that we're looking at. In response to Katrina, there was some 15 million citizens affected, and that was something like 400,000 people lost their jobs. But when that happened, what was our country's response? Our country's response was that we mobilized $100 billion, 40% of the GDP of Louisiana. $100 billion, 40% of the GDP, in order to pick up that part of the world. And already we're seeing the oil spill notwithstanding, recovery going on, communities being rebuilt, and that community picking up. And I say that because as we think about our own challenges, we need to be thinking of that order of magnitude: moon landing, Marshall Plan, response to disaster. And as we think about moving from our father's economy to the next economy. So what does that mean? Transformation. Well, to us, as we've thought about it, we said, well, you know, this probably isn't something that every city can do on its own. It needs to be regional. And it's probably not something that you can shoot a rifle at one issue or another. Instead, everything's kind of connected to everything. You can't speak about workforce without speaking about innovation. You can't be building new clusters without thinking about financing. And you can't be thinking about labor without thinking about the transportation to get people to the jobs and so forth. And it's all tied up with each other. And we also came back and said, you know, it's probably beyond the scope of any one sector or institution. So the elements of a transformation is that it needs to be regional, integrated, and collaborative, which sounds great, right? If here's Whitehead up here with his platitudes. The only rub is this is not how we're set up, right? And I suspect most of you in your communities aren't as well. Instead, we're highly fragmented politically, so that what even is a region is a tough thing to deal with. We do have silos. So as my friends in Northeast Ohio know, if you want to work on workforce issues in Medina County, I think Commissioner Hambly's here, if you want to work on workforce issues in Medina County, you interact with your colleagues in Akron. But if you want to work on economic development issues, you work with your colleagues in Cleveland. And so we have these silos, and then finally we have these geographic boundaries that don't correspond to the way that the economy operates. So we've had to try to overcome some of that. And I guess the one thing I'm proud to say is that here in Northeast Ohio, we've been fighting back. We've been fighting back, and we think we're having success, and we think we're going to be the story of the next decade.